10 o'clock. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know there'll be other people joining us. Great. I want to welcome you to this month's Seniors Living Smarter webinar. I still like calling them seminars, but in response to COVID, as everybody's well aware, we switched to the webinars, which has really worked well for some people who could not come to our live seminars. And so But a welcome to everybody who is here with us today. And just a word, we're all learning about Zoom and how things work, and sometimes there's surprises. I just got the message on my screen that my connection is unstable, so just bear with us if we fade in and out some. We all do the best we can. I want to thank Jeff Cramp, who works with me and keeping us up and going. He was been working with me for a number of years with marketing, and now has added this role of helping us with the Zoom webinars, and I greatly appreciate that. So for those of you who have not had the opportunity to meet, I am Virginia Lazenby. I'm a certified senior downsizing coach and realtor. I'm the founder and host of the Seniors Living Smarter seminars. I just saw a need for seniors to have information, and so you can make decisions, and it's been exciting. This is our 5th year of doing the monthly seminars, webinars. Last month we celebrated our 50th, and that was a special time, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But I do just want to remind people that the whole purpose of the seminars or webinars is to educate, equip, and inspire seniors to make informed decisions and empowered choices. We're really here to support you in terms of your lifestyle goals. So as I mentioned, last month marked our 50th webinar. We're going to do a quick poll here. How many of you saw the article in the paper, Seminars Address Issues for Older Adults? I hope you saw that in the Williamson County Sun a couple of weeks. We're going to do a quick poll here. This will get people awake. You can vote yes, you saw it, or no, you did not. Let's see how many of you, number of you saw it. Okay, this is fun to see. And I'm always forgetting what you're seeing so far. 65% so far report they saw it. We still have people voting. Let's see what we come up with here. I have to admit, I knew it was to be in the paper that week, and I searched and could not find it, and was very disappointed. And Beverly, who works with me on the seminars, sent me a message and said, great article. I did then go back and find it on the bottom of page 11 or wherever it was there, but we were glad it was there. So congratulations to the 13 plus people, because several of you are couples who found the article. In fact, we should put it up on the website. We can make it into a blog, I think, Jeff, so people who would see it. There were some nice quotes from some people some of our attendees and stories shared. But again, just stressing the importance of people having this as an opportunity for gaining information. When I mentioned about our 50th seminar last month, I said, if we were live, we would have had a celebratory cake and so on. Oh, no, I forget to do this. I think this, and I'm never sure what's my responsibility and what Jeff's there. If people want to see how our poll worked, 65% said they saw the article. So, but I see we couldn't have a celebratory cake or some kind of celebration. I kept thinking, what do we do to celebrate COVID style? So I came up with the Seniors Living Smarter mask. So I am in the process, since we don't get to have our interactions at the webinar seminars, I'm in the process of popping by with a little safe delivery basket to hand the mask to you. And so I'll have an opportunity to meet and visit with you. We're trying to do as many as we can as pop-bys. Well, I've started, but it takes a while. So they will be coming for those of you who attended multiple seminars, webinars with us. And let's see, we've been doing these, as I say, for 4.5 years. So kind of a nucleus of people, but we always have new people joining us. Let's go ahead. We had another poll today. How many of you are first-time attendees today? Jeff can put that poll up for us, and we're going to see if this is your first time to be with us. Oh, there we come. All right, you can mark yes if it's your first time. All right. This time we're not, sometimes we go through and say, how many of you have been here 2 or 4 or 5 or 10 or different intervals? Today, we're just going to see how many of you are new with us today. We're thrilled to have new people here. Hope you'll find these beneficial and return and spread the word with other people. Okay, so yay, we have so far people who have responded. Okay, good, thanks, Jeff. So the 4 new people, I recognize some of the names, and I know that Morty gave a shout out to a couple of the new people. Glad to have you with us. Okay, speaking shout outs, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. We have other businesses and organizations who've joined with me in supporting these seminars. We're all committed to education. Very much that these are just not marketing opportunities. Obviously, we love to form relationships with people and for you to see the value of services we provide. But I do appreciate and the others who joined with me in this endeavor. Silver Key benefits. So when you need people to help you look at what kind of health insurance, long-term care insurance, help do perhaps an analysis of that, our friends from Silver Key Benefits are there to serve you. We will make sure you have their contact information. Traditions Health, we have one of their people as one of our panelists today, so Kara will fill you in a little bit more about that. Traditions Health is a hospice program, may not be the right word, but it is so much more than that. And hospice is so much more. I think too often we think of hospice as the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it can really enrich people's lives in many ways, caregivers as well as the person receiving the care. And so when you need more information, Traditions Health is a wonderful resource. Vera Bank, we've had Will Boughton on some of our programs. As he says, Vera Bank Wealth Management is a fiduciary providing financial and estate planning, trusteeship, executorship, and investment management with a truly local touch. And it's really exciting to be involved with that group. I know in several of our webinars this year, we've had people asking about who can manage my estate. I don't have family to do that. What do I do? Legal issues. And Will Boughton at Vera Bank can be a great resource for that. And maybe works out there or may direct you to other resources as well. Visiting Angels, many of you are familiar with. We appreciate the service of Visiting Angels when we need some type of assistance in our homes, the valuable resource. The Visiting Angels, like I said, I wanted to mention too, I know there's been some concerns during COVID when people said, we can't add new people, we can't get somebody to come help us out for short-term or longer-term care. They are taking new clients, and so they're there to provide quality service. The Wesleyan, one of our sponsors, of course, Wesleyan has a whole array of services from their residential with independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, as well as they also provide home care and home health and hospice. So a wide services there, a great resource in the community. And Seniors Living Smarter services, that's my business. And we are really here to help people with downsizing. And that whole idea of we can be your one-stop shop from sorting, organizing, making the decision to move, to organizing the move, to getting rid of the stuff, to preparing your property, to marketing in the real estate portion. We want to simplify and take the stress off of the seniors and their family members. So we love to help people with that. But let's move on to today's topic. Don't be an ostrich when it's time to move. Now, some people have kind of challenged me on that topic. And yes, we did refine the title a little bit, but It really came out of a planning session last October when a group of regular attendees got together to brainstorm ideas for topics for our webinars this year. There was very strong sentiment about the need to address this issue. And some people who were there were very forthright about, this is something we're really struggling with. And we put this together to help people. Some topics some months are more, perhaps a little more challenging. Some months are a little bit more just factual information. And for some people this month, maybe a little bit more, make us feel a little uncomfortable sometime, but help us know the resources. And so that's what we're going to be about. We have in the past had some seminars with our residents of independent living communities, and those are always very popular. We dealt with the topic of what does ready look like. We often hear people say, oh, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready. Well, what does ready look like? And that also relates to our topic today. We had a great panel of seniors who shared their experience and how wonderful their move was for them. And another, we often hear, oh, I can't give up my independence. I can't give up my freedom. And so our topic was, how much freedom do I give up with independent living? And the resounding response from our panel was none. I gain more independence in an environment where I feel a little more secure, activities are more readily available, and yes, I am very active. And so those are great. Today, we're going to turn to a panel of professionals within the senior industry, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a minute. So not only the role they're in right now, but they bring a breadth of experience to be able to share stories, help us look at what are some of the factors? What is it that people are going through? And that's what we want to learn about today. And just to let you know, for those of you who are new, our format is we have prepared questions that we will go through. And then we will open it up to the floor for you to raise your hand electronically at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a place where you can raise your hand. We will unmute you so then you can ask your question or make comments. So that's the order. We found that works well. So I think we'll be ready to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start and have, that's right. I want to start with, it won't matter, but Kara, I'm just going to start with you and have you tell us your name and who you're with, and briefly about your background, why you're our expert today, one of our experts.
Oh, I'm happy to, Virginia. Thank you so much for asking me to join and making the space available. Like you said, educating people on healthcare is a passion of mine, and so I'm really happy to be here. My name is Kara Edmond. I'm a care coordinator for Traditions Hospice, and my background is about 20 years of medical social work with a little bit of graduate medical education sprinkled in there. So I have been working with children to adults at that really vulnerable time in their lives after they've had a health crisis, to understand what their future looks like and to try and keep them safe going forward. And so that's really what my passion is. And I'm happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Kara. And that word crisis, we're going to come back to that in some ways, but having a plan, and that's what we'll be about too. So thanks, Kara. We appreciate your being here. Debbie.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Virginia, for having me as well. I'm really happy to be here to support any questions that might come up. So my name's Debbie Beatty. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also a certified care manager. I've been providing care management services to individuals and those with neurological disorders as well for the past 11 years. This is my passion, is really supporting individuals to identify a plan of care and interventions that support quality of life. So you'll hear me say throughout today's webinar and talk about quality of life and what is it that we need to do to ensure that independence and quality of life. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Virginia, for having me.
Thank you, Debbie. And again, I want to emphasize that the phrase quality of life. I think that's something we will be wrestling with today. And I think you will help us make sense, both of you help us make sense about quality of life, what it can mean. There may be a different environment that will give us a higher quality of life than what we are aware of. And those are some of the issues we'll be dealing with. Well, I want to start out, I talked briefly about our title, Don't Be an Ostrich When It's Time to Move. I want to ask our panelists, when you saw that title, you know, what did that mean to you? It can be first response, it can be as your professional hat on or whatever. But Debbie, what did that mean? What do you think of with Don't Be an Ostrich When It's Time to Move On?
Sure, Virginia. So at first I really had to take a look at the title and identify what information do we need to give from that title that's going to be supportive of this webinar. As a nurse care manager and just identifying some of the challenges my own clients have faced over the last 11 years regarding relocation, oftentimes people don't want to move out of their home. They identify living in their own home as that quality of life piece. And where I agree, living in our own home absolutely provides quality of life, when there's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about how do we pre-plan, how do we get ready in the event that we're going to need to move into a more supportive environment, whether that be residential living, independent living, senior independent living, or assisted living. So I see that title as really, like you said, Virginia, taking that opportunity, let's pre-plan, let's identify some of those opportunities, places that maybe we want to move into, and consider all options. So this webinar, I'm hoping, will open up that conversation so everybody can see what are the options that we have. How do we really pre-plan for next steps so that we continue to improve our own quality of life through these measures?
And I just want to pick up on one thing there too. I know when I say it's time to move, one of the options, as we've mentioned, may be remaining in your home. And how can you pre-plan to make that as high of quality of life as possible? And so we're not completely disregarding that. We just want to look for quality of life, and we'll come back to that. Kara, what did this make you think of?
Well, I love the saying, Virginia, and so I'm from the Midwest originally, y'all, and I talk in pictures. And my version of this saying that I use with my families that I work with is that it's the way a fish doesn't see water. And I think as we age and as we make adjustments to our changing health needs, to our changing social needs, sometimes we don't realize how far we've gone, and we aren't aware of the changes that are happening around us. And I think that happens for me when I hear this title because of the emotional aspects. You know, another joke that I have is that denial is not just a river in Egypt. And when we're aging and things are changing around us, we get so good at adapting and coping that we don't realize how much help we're actually needing. And that denial clicks in. So for me, if I could do anything for my seniors that I work with, it's really normalizing that and talking about it. And I think that in some ways, when I work with families, helping them to identify the emotions that are going into some of these decisions so that they can make smart decisions without as much emotion clouding it, trying to tease out that difference between, you know, is this an emotional reaction or is this a factual reaction? And to understand, you know, that we can kind of reframe. And I love what you mentioned about moving to independent living. Do I give up my independence or do I just get a different type of independence? And that type of emotional work that sometimes has to happen either before or at the same time that we're physically making moves or bringing more help into our home or whatever that looks like. For me, the ostrich is stopping the denial, recognizing the emotions that are impacting our decisions, and then creating a plan to move forward.
I think that, you know, it all ties together so wonderfully. And denial comes in a variety of ways. And I know there's some people on the webinar today who I've had conversations with, and it's that hard decision.
Yes.
And a variety of decisions. You know, even if I am going to make a move, some of us are struggling with, do I stay in this locale where my friends are, or do I move to where family is? So there are a variety of decisions. And the weight that I know some of our attendees are feeling, and that this will come up, I think, in a variety of ways, one of the challenges is perhaps one of, husband or wife, one may be having perhaps more concerns with, we often see, could be physical, or we often see with memory issues. How do we plan ahead for that? Unfortunately, we're not always on the same track. How do we work together? What are the realities? It's uncomfortable, but I know that that is an issue that many of us are facing today. I just have to just tell a little story here. For those of you who attended our seminars over the years, even starting at the library years ago, I have to tell her story. Gloria Weisenberger, those of you who were at the seminar, remember Gloria? White-haired woman, yes, that's not real descriptive of our group, but would sit center front, just beautiful white curly hair, and was very faithful attender. And we'd often share her stories. And she was thinking, okay, do I stay here where my friends are? Do I move? I had one daughter, do I move to Baltimore, DC area where my daughter is? And that was a hard decision. I don't want to give up my home and so on. Well, I just have to report, and I'm going to have to send Gloria the recording of this. They are on their way to Baltimore. The decision was reached, and a lot of planning. We've been working with them and getting ready for the whole downsizing. And her daughter flew in from Baltimore after, it's supposed to have been in May, but COVID pushed it back to now. But she is on her way driving through Tennessee today. And there are a variety of decisions that we have to make. So that was neat to see. And we wish them the very best. She's moving to a really nice, it will be a continuum of care community in the Baltimore area. Okay, now with more of my extended discussion there, and you've both alluded to this, but let's delve in a little bit more. From your experience, what do you see that is holding people back? All right, and I'm going to ask, I think I'll have Kara start with this and then Debbie, but then we'll go back and forth. Again, this is where your experience is so important to see. We look at it from our own, and sometimes we think we're the only ones wrestling with some of these issues, or there's not an easy way out. Well, there's probably not an easy way out, but being realistic is the most important step, knowing what's out there. So let's go ahead and Kara, you start out with us on what, or maybe you give a couple, then we'll have Debbie. Let's do it that way. A couple of things. What do you see holding people back, keeping their head down in the sand?
Well, I'm so grateful that you like to tell stories, Virginia, because yes. So, I mentioned that when I think about this, the thing that really resonates with me is that it's the way a fish doesn't see water. And my example of that is very near and dear to my heart. So my grandparents, were together from 15 and 16 in Monticello, Iowa. They had their children very young. They raised their children, and they've known each other their entire life. My grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. At that time, they were living in a senior's condo, and my grandfather was very committed to keeping my grandmother in the condo with him. So kind of as you're talking about, Virginia, when couples have different needs and what happens with that. And when I would talk to my grandfather, because of course I'm a medical social worker, so I'm in there all like, Grandpa, we got to do this. Grandpa, we got to do this. And when I would talk to my grandfather, he would often come with this bargaining, right? He would say, well, if this is as bad as it gets, then I can keep your grandmother here. Well, if this is as bad as it gets, right? When she became incontinent, he's like, well, that's fine. That's fine if this is as bad as it gets. And then when she started being, she lost the ability to swallow, so there was a lot of saliva. Then my grandfather was like, well, if this is as bad as it gets. And that bargaining piece and not realizing how much he was taking on. And what finally became an issue was when she started wandering. And, he would deadbolt things and lock things and do everything he could. But one night she wandered out of the condo and into another person's unit. And so they had to call the cops to come and find her. And when they found her, it was by reviewing the security cameras from the unit. She had gone into an unlocked condo and very sweetly, because my grandmother was a gem, covered the couple up in their bed. And when my grandfather and the police officers came to get my grandmother from this unit, she was terrified. She was terrified, and she lashed out physically. And at that point, it was this understanding that my grandmother's needs and my grandfather's needs were very divergent. And so my grandfather made the very difficult decision to place her in a skilled nursing facility. In Monticello, Iowa, they didn't have memory care. That wasn't an option for them. But what happened from that very difficult decision was my grandfather got to go back to being a husband instead of a caregiver. And so every day he drove from Monticello, Iowa down to Anamosa and would spend the afternoon with my grandmother in the skilled nursing facility. He developed friendships with that staff. He still takes, my grandmother has since passed, he still takes the staff out for Christmas dinner, and he runs a support group. And so he really thought that when he made the decision to place my grandmother, that his marriage was in some ways over, or that he was letting her down. And there was a lot of guilt and a lot of struggle to figure out what this new version of their relationship looked like. You know, how can he stay married? Because that was so important to him. He loves her still, even after she's passed, so very much. And so when I think about what holds people back is, yes, it's denial, but it's also this great kind of existential crisis for, well, what does this mean? What does this look like? Who am I if I don't have a home to take care of? If I've been taking care of a home, what do I do with my Sunday afternoons if I'm not doing yard work? So there's that kind of image and self, I guess, understanding of who am I and how am I that we have to reckon with when we make those moves. But the denial piece for me, or the ostrich piece for me, is you don't realize that you've already given up so many parts of that in adapting to this environment that maybe isn't as supportive and constructive to this new phase of your life, if that makes any sense. So I feel like we hold on to these old versions of ourselves that we can't act out, we can't live, because we perhaps don't have the mobility to do the yard work, or we don't have the memory to turn off the oven. And then we miss out on this next version that has the potential to be just as rich and safe. It's just very new and scary.
And, you know, I want to jump in there and kind of give a shout out to our next webinar in October, where we will be dealing with memory care and dementia. We're not getting into the facts, the medical part and all that. We'll be, you know, how do we support? It's the living part of it. So I just wanted to, that was a great introduction to that. And I know I worked with clients for downsizing. Oh, and the pain of wanting to stay together, and it was important. And, you know, some days were better than other days, you know, and when the wife would turn to me, so I don't know who this man is. It's a nice man who's helping me. Mm-hmm. And then you know, working with the husband too. I mean, it's, all of those are things we have to deal with, and so important. But that was a beautiful story you shared. Let's go ahead to Debbie, because you ran several things together there, which we appreciate, Kara. Debbie, what do you see as one of the things that holds people back?
So Kara, I think that you just said it all. You did such a beautiful job in really describing, and I love the story that you shared. I have very similar stories with both of my grandparents as well, but I think that you just really touched on that nicely. I really do believe that it's that loss of independence and denial that's holding people back. And again, we talk about memory care and cognitive decline, and that sometimes is definitely a factor why somebody might consider moving from their home into assisted living or memory care. That's just one piece of it though, right? And a lot of individuals and a lot of my clients might say, well, you know, cognitively I'm doing okay, my memory is good, so there really isn't a reason. There's so many other great opportunities to consider moving into a different environment when it is time. And again, we go back to the planning piece, and that planning piece of any type of transition is going to be really important. I have a lot of memory loss stories as well, Kara, and I could share very similar stories, including one individual who was a client, and I had been trying to talk the family into coming on to service with us so we could support a relocation, a safe relocation. And the family actually was in denial because they thought that they wanted to support it was actually his sister, and he wanted to support and really respect her wishes. It was at one point he finally called me and said, I need you, we're ready to come on board. And it was because his sister was driving to a grocery store that was about a half a mile from her home. And she ended up in a different county about 2.5 hours away looking for the grocery store on the sidewalk. Her car was on the sidewalk and she was lost. So she ended up in the hospital. He identified this is time to do something. We came on board, and it was that relocation plan that was unplanned, right? We probably could have planned that a year earlier so this incident wouldn't have happened. Thank goodness she was okay. But that's a memory loss story, a cognitive decline story. But there's also some great opportunities for individuals who want to stay independent. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this, Virginia, but they want to stay independent, but thinking that if I move from my home, I'm really giving up that independence. And it's just not so. We also look at, so as a registered nurse, we also look at the clinical piece of this. And a lot of our individuals, a lot of seniors deal with many chronic illnesses, and a lot of them are progressive. So again, we want to keep you independent, keep you well, see how we can promote quality of life through better health. And you can do this with good planning. And a lot of our assisted livings and even our senior living environments have programs very similar to Seniors Living Smarter, because the goal is to keep everybody independent. So would have loved to share just everything Kara shared, because I think, again, that she described it beautifully. But I think, again, just to kind of recap, it's that fear of losing independence. It's the denial, and not only the denial of the individual, but also families. And we don't want to let somebody down. And we feel if we move into a different environment, maybe we're letting our children down, because now they don't have the family home to come to anymore. But wherever you are, that's where home is. And that's where they're going to visit you. And that those memories are always there. So such great opportunities, so many different options. And so happy that I'm part of this conversation to share.
So anything else you want to pick up with Kara there? Or, I hear the planning portion. Go ahead, Kara.
Well, the planning portion, and I think sometimes in healthcare and listening to Debbie talk, I am just struck by the amount of knowledge and expertise that you have. And when I think about planning and when I talk to families about it, sometimes they don't really know what I mean. You know what I mean? And they don't understand what is available to them. And I remember I was working with this woman, and she, all clients are special, but this woman in particular gets me right here still. And she has COPD, and she compared her oxygen tubing to like tentacles of an octopus. And we were looking at her living environment, and her unit was like the furthest one down the hall, right? And so I just kind of had to ask her, you have a pulmonary disease that is progressive. Like Debbie said, we have chronic health conditions that get worse. And you're going to spend your limited energy walking that hallway? For a social person that wants to get out and engage in the world, if it takes all of your day's worth of energy just to get down to the, community room, what are the chances that you're going to go and do that? They're pretty low, because you're probably going to run out of energy when you're making your food. And so when we started to kind of talk with her about, what does quality of life mean to you? What is important to you? And we pull it away from the specifics. So for this particular person, she wanted to be independent, be able to take care of her own activities of daily living, and go to the common area. That's what was important to her. And so what we had to change was finding a unit where it was closer to the common area, so it was more in line with her medical needs, and didn't cause her to be exhausted before she even got to the quality part of her day. And those are the kind of planning type things that we can do to identify opportunities to shift the way that we spend our energy as seniors, so that we are spending more energy doing what we love instead of spending energy coping with the disease process, when maybe an independent living environment that brought you meals would give you more freedom to have that quality of life. Another COPD patient that I worked with really resisted using a wheelchair. That was very, very difficult. But once we kind of pointed out, if we put you in a scooter, I understand that that's, a grieving part that has to go into that. but now you can go to your grandson's baseball games, and kind of being able to make plans to keep somebody safe within the limits of their disease or within the limits of, their physical functioning, that really allows them to enjoy life. And for me, when I can help an individual, take some of the stress off so that they can focus on those good moments, and I can kind of plug them back into their family or plug them back into their job, that's the most rewarding part for me. And so much of what you said, Debbie, about being able to plan is so important for that, because folks don't know what options there are out there. And that planning piece really helps maximize the time that they have.
And I think that planning is a variety of things from resources, knowing what kind of resources, even understanding more about the work you all do and people like you, care managers, whatever. So people who need someone to help them process this, what kind of resources are there for people? Knowing, okay, I want to stay in my home, what adjustments? We've had seminars and we'll have them again. How do I adapt my environment to make it as safe as I can? Yes, the wheelchair, the scooter. We have a friend who, and just keeps adapting. It's amazing how outgoing and, looking at his scooter and how he makes adjustments. He has to be realistic. That's what he needs, but that's kept him going.
Yeah.
And so that is so important. Knowing the kinds of communities that, if you're wanting to find out more about that, things I kept hearing when we started these, when people go, oh, I'm not going to go to those places. That's where the old people live. One of our seniors at the time telling her story, that she told that story herself. She wasn't going to live with those old people. Well, for whatever reason, she did make the move. And of course, within a very short time, she said, well, that was the best move ever. Now I'm much more active. And I loved it, because behind the scenes, when she gives tours in an independent living community, and people will say, I'm not ready for this, or, I'm not, and she's muttering, probably more outspoken sometimes about, no, you're about to wait too long, and that's the issue. If we may miss opportunities. We were on our website, we have information about the variety and the difference in independent assisted living, understanding these are not the nursing homes, and even skilled nursing is very different today. And people need that. We were last year, before COVID, doing some field trips. I know some of our attendees today went on some of our field trips to visit independent living. Wow. And said, oh, well, there's a lot more there than what I thought. And we had some of those people to make the move then. So it was knowing, and they're all different. You can't say, oh, I went to one. They're all alike. No, they're not. That's having that information from, what is their meal plan? What kind of activities are provided? Pets, there are just a variety out there. So that's part of knowing the resources too. Okay, so we've talked about not knowing, the denial, afraid of losing independence, worried about what family members will think, and so on. Are there any other points you want to move in there about what you see as people holding them back from making the move?
Would you mind if I just share a little bit about social isolation?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so I know that there's a lot of studies that have been done, and I do promise, Virginia, to send over a couple of those studies to you and Jeff, so you have them available for our audience. But social isolation is really important. We know the stress of social isolation, depression that may accompany that definitely can impact one's health. It's not a reason necessarily to move from home into a facility because you're isolated. We have to identify some of those outlets, because it's really important that everybody attends to their own emotional needs. And I know, Kara, you touched on that, and I'm so appreciative that you did. When we think of social isolation, though, and we think of moving into an assisted living, can I just give you one example? I have an 88-year-old client, and I've had her for about 2 years. She's living independently in a condo, very close to the ocean, actually. And this is in California. And her family is doing everything they can to keep her in the condo. This is where she wants to be. Well, her husband passed right about 2 years ago when I actually met her. And she's at that point now where she's telling me I'm lonely. And with COVID, it's been really challenging because we're trying to think of different activities, senior centers, different places that she can go to meet and engage with people. And she is so lonely, she's actually made that decision now. I'd really love to go into assisted living. So we supported her. We identified a place, again, close to the ocean, somewhere where she actually had the same type of view that she has in her home right now. And she went for the purpose of identifying a partner in her life. And she found a partner. And the beautiful thing about this is it's so important to her. And there's always that opportunity. It doesn't matter what our age is. If there's something that we need that really supports our quality of life and whatever those intimacy needs are that we have, I think it needs to be addressed. And so we were able to support her. We identified a very active independent living, but it's going to be that continuum of care. So it starts at independent living and goes all the way through to assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing. So she's found a place now that she's very secure. She's going to live her life out, and she's found an individual. They haven't actually moved in together, but they spend a lot of time together at this assisted living environment, and I have never seen somebody so happy, and it's just so wonderful. The transition wasn't something we did overnight. It's a process. It's a planning process, and we were able to support the family. The family was a little concerned about her motivation for moving. It doesn't matter. What matters is what was in her heart and what she needed. So addressing somebody's social isolation, addressing depression, addressing loneliness is something that's really important. And I talk about this, and there may be a lot of people in our audience that this just doesn't really apply, but I want everybody to know that moving into this type of environment definitely gives you that opportunity to make new friends.
You may not find a partner, but you're going to have a variety of friends and opportunities.
Right,
and
right.
I think along those lines, I just so many times want to say to people when they'll say to me, oh, I want to move, but I just can't give up my independence. I'm really lonely since my husband passed away. I don't have anyone to have my 4 o'clock wine with, but I can't give up my independence. And you just want to say, peel it back, look around you. What did you just tell me? It's the isolation. What can we do? In this case, the fall occurred, the crisis occurred. She was moved by her family to assisted living where she did not want to be, would not have been on her list. She worked her way back out to independent living, but that being prepared, if we could just hear what we're saying, and I know I do the same thing in my own world too, I'm sure, but I appreciate your sharing that story. And I've seen people who they're so isolated. Well, I used to play bridge, but it's so hard to get out now, and you just see them, their recliner becomes their world. And these are sharp people. Yeah. And then when they make a move and I see them in a community interacting with people, having dinner together, going to play bridge again, because it's accessible, and to see the smile, and the more we can help people in that transition to support them, not forcing anyone to make a move. But if that looks like your planning and your preparation, because one of the things that holds people back when we're talking about what holds people back is it is hard work to move. I mean, even if you get through the emotional making the decision, oh my, have you seen all the stuff in my house? I can't get this done. I'm just staying here, shut down. And that's where the importance of move management, so when there are the professionals who can help make that move to make it easier for the person and for their family. You cannot depend on family. They have families generally too. But so many people just think they have to do it themselves. And that's, in my case, that's what we do. But to help people achieve that quality of life. Okay, let's go ahead. And again, a lot of these overlap, but that's fine. This one does overlap a lot, but it made sense when we put the questions together. So what advice can you offer people who find themselves in this dilemma? I can give specific examples of, and even if the husband says, well, I get confused when I'm driving, I'm just, and the wife may be saying, he's always made the decisions, and now I find I'm the one making the decision. I see lots of of those, and we shared a variety. But Debbie, what are some, okay, we've talked about the issues. Are there recommendations? What do we do to help people move forward?
I think it's just really starting that conversation, Virginia, and identifying, if you need to, someone to facilitate that communication. Just a couple days ago here in Georgetown, I met with the family, and the family came together because they weren't sure how to start this conversation with family. Again, they just didn't have the information. So seeking that information through professionals, identifying whether it's care management, whether it's healthcare professionals, it could be one's MD that might even start that conversation, especially if somebody's maybe not driving as well as they should. Identifying somebody like you and those professionals who can help that conversation move along as well. But I think what's really important is just identifying the need. And there are so many wonderful professionals in this area that's able to help. And a lot of these professionals are happy to have that conversation with you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to need to pay for someone to sit down and just have a conversation about what your options, really understanding those options. Like you said, Virginia, make a visit to a couple places, you know, a couple places that you feel might meet your needs and your lifestyle. Make a list and identify what's missing in my life. What is it that I would like to maybe consider these options for? Talk with your family about it so that they might be able to share their observations. Sometimes your family and your friends' observations of how you're doing or what they see missing might be real valuable feedback for you.
You know, I want to pick up on that, Debbie, because I've seen the cases where, oh, but you know, my kids won't want me to do this, or especially if we're still living in our family home, you know, and some of that. Well, on the other side, the kids are having the same conversation reversed. Oh, I just wish mom or dad would move. They need to get out of that big house. You know, well, let's have that conversation together. And we will continue to work on making people aware of those resources. I know dollar signs are always a concern, and we'd never want to take advantage of a professional, but yet there are opportunities to resources to help with that initial conversation. A facilitator can just help pull back some of those. I know in my training as a downsizing coach, I'm not a counselor by any means, but what are some questions we can ask, that reflective listening to help people themselves identify what, like you said, what's missing in their current life? What is it that I need? What, you know, how could we make that happen? Kara, you jump in. What do you see as some things to help people who are caught in this dilemma?
Ladies, I love it. I agree. And as I said, it's the way a fish doesn't see water. You know, we're so busy living these lives that we don't realize how long it's been since we've been to a bridge class. We don't realize how long it's been since we were able to walk to the mailbox comfortably. You know, we don't realize. And having those mirrors, if they're available to you in the forms of friends and family, perhaps it's a physician, you know, perhaps it's the cashier, you know, at your grocery store, but being brave enough, I guess, and realistic enough to say, have you noticed a change in me? And it can be really daunting with families to try and, I think, frame that conversation. So my pro tip is to compare based on milestones, right? If we say to ourselves, you know, what has my change been like? It's kind of an overwhelming question and we don't know what it's based on. So I would compare yourself, maybe not this Thanksgiving because it's COVID, but thinking, how has my life changed this Thanksgiving versus last Thanksgiving? And having those benchmarks, I find major holidays are fantastic for this, but having those benchmarks can help us see the water that we're swimming in, right? You know, maybe this Thanksgiving, I just don't have the energy to go to the store to make the 4 pies to take over to my loved one's house that I normally would. And we can be kind of curious about that, right? You know, is this lack of energy because of a disease progression? Is this lack of energy because of social isolation, like Debbie spoke about so eloquently, and depression? You know, is there something that I could do, a change in my living environment that would give me more energy or free up energy so that I can make those pies? Or maybe the converse is true and you're glad that you're not making those pies because nobody appreciated them anyways, you know, whatever that is for you.
Like the fruit cake?
Yeah, right. But being able to, put those markers in for yourself to identify change so that you can make interventions. That is my most actionable piece of advice, I guess, is to create benchmarks and be curious about them.
It's interesting when you say that. I was going through some stuff, and I start journals and then don't continue, and we have all these little starts, but I was just looking at one, and it's when I lived in Minnesota for 10 years before moving back here, and I was reflecting on Thanksgiving at my parents' in Oklahoma, which used to be the formal dinner. I mean, it was at home, but the china, the crystal, the linen, mother would prepare everything, and it was to a T. And then over the years, how it changed. Well, then it became a buffet, pick up your food and take it to the table and so on. And it's not that one is right and one is wrong, but I remember thinking, and you just helped me have even a different perspective. I was glad mother could adapt, but then I also had to adapt. Mother's not always going to be there. I mean, my parents have both passed away now, but sometimes we freeze people as we want them to be, but we have to accept and move on ourselves. And to me, that just helped me to think about that. Anything else that you can think of, either one of you, or we may go in and open it up, because I'm sure we have a lot of questions and comments. People probably want to share some stories. But before we do that, anything you want to call to our attention, Debbie or Kara?
I'm just really interested to hear the questions our audience has and see if we might be able to offer some resources and support.
Great. Okay, well, with that great introduction, let's go ahead. So you have on the bottom of your screen, I believe, where you can raise hand, and Jeff and I work together on this. We're learning to technology anyway. So when you have a question, if you'll raise your hand, it's kind of a joint effort. We unmute you. You have to help unmute yourselves too. But what kinds of questions or comments or stories that people would like to share? Or are you so overwhelmed, or that people are going to be very quiet? Okay, well, oh, here we come. Thank you, Anne. Anne Gowdy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, hi, Anne. Welcome.
Hi. We are firmly, and we at this point are two of us, we're firmly in favor of planning, but we also know from experience of the generation before us that there are so many versions of old age, so many different kinds of failing, some sudden, some gradual, that it's really hard to know what to plan for. And so all we've wanted to do is to gather information about options. And I'm sorry that we can't do some of your field trips at this point. But
we're going to work on some alternatives. We may start having some virtual field trips. Go ahead.
Okay. But this is the problem. Planning is great if you had a clue about what to plan for. But we've seen the elder who suffered from memory issues. We've seen the one who had perfect memory until she died at 92, but became more and more frail and bird-like. We saw the one who suddenly fell, ended up in the wheelchair, never walked again. And each one required a different kind of care. I might say, though, that the only thing that gives me confidence is that these three people each wanted or needed a different kind of care. And when the time came, each one found exactly the right thing that was appropriate and affordable, and it worked. And so I have to have some faith that if we get some information about options, that if we suddenly have to choose one or gradually, we'll have some idea of what it would cost, where it is, that sort of thing. Any advice about general planning? We've tried to simplify our lives. We've downsized twice. We try to keep records of the important things that someone else would need if we were incapacitated or suddenly not here. what we keep saying is, well, when there's one of us rather than two, these questions would become more urgent and come more into focus. Um,
Good
that's where we
question.
are at this point.
And you know, I think, Ann, that's another thing that causes us to shut down because we don't know. If we knew, am I going to be dealing with memory care? Am I going to be dealing with a health condition? You know, but it's so overwhelming what might happen. So Debbie or Kara, who wants to start us off?
So, Kara, I guess I can. Thank you, Anne, for joining in and asking the question. And I agree, we're not sure clinically what's going to happen in 2, 5, 10 years from now. So you can't really plan for a disease process or for any type of condition. What we can plan for, though, is what is it that you're going to want? What if something were to happen? What situation or environment would you want to be in? What type of support would you like? I think part of, and what we're not really going to get into, we're not going to dive into, would be advanced directive planning. But that's definitely something, and I don't know if we've already had that
Yes.
discussion, but that advanced directive planning and what your wishes are would be really important. So in the event there is a crisis, that's part of the planning piece. Professionals also can support you in what does the next 10 years, we always just kind of take a 10-year, just as a general rule, what does that long-term need plan look like? If you're very healthy right now, we want to plan for what is quality of life. So when you say, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen, you're right, we just aren't sure. But the planning piece is really based on what would you like to see happen in the event that you were ill, or in the event that you're very healthy. What does quality of life mean to you? So I kind of think of that for planning. I think the advanced directive is really important too. So if you are incapacitated, you mentioned somebody being incapacitated, we know that it's still your plan. It's still your decision. And so we want to move forward with those plans as you've written out. So that documentation becomes really important as well. I don't know if that is supportive of your question. What we don't want to see happen is a crisis. So I think part of the planning is, let's plan for what you want prior to a crisis happening. And often individuals wait till that crisis for them to make that next step, to make that next move. And I want you to be prepared in the event something happens, that you're ready. We all know what it is you want. Your family knows, your friends, everybody knows where you want to be in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. Kara, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I have a slightly different take, but what I love so much is that, you know, plan for what we know in terms of being able to do advanced directives. And the way that I think about this, and when I work with my seniors, you know, I make a joke. When I was having my babies, the thing to do was these birth plans, right? So we'd sit down and think about, you know, my birth plan, and I want purple balloons, and I want to eat crackers, and I want XYZ. And you know what? My son had a different plan, and he didn't care what I had written down, and we just did it. But to Debbie's point, I knew kind of where I wanted to do it, and I knew who I wanted to have supporting me. And so no matter, you know, kind of what your aging process looks like, you can identify those people that you want to help you see the water that you're swimming in and involve them. When I think about planning, there are so many professionals, and their services are free, and they will come into your home and do home safety evaluations. And for me, this is a big part of planning, because when we do a home safety evaluation, we're looking at your physical abilities, your cognitive abilities, and the way that your living environment supports that or hurts that. My rant, and I get on this so much with my grandfather, so he lives alone, and it terrifies me. Yes, he's in a senior environment, but he urinates in the middle of the night. I think many of us do. And I am terrified that he's going to fall and be down in his bathroom for 12 hours until somebody notices that he hasn't gotten his newspaper. And my solution for him, it's very simple. He won't take me up on it. I want him to get an Alexa so that he could shout out, call 911 if he was down, right? And for me, there are little tweaks that we can do to hopefully lessen a crisis. And that is the planning piece for me. How do I plan to manage crises so they're not as bad? And I'm sure Debbie would agree with me, there is a real difference between a senior that is down on the ground for 15, 20 minutes and a senior that is down on the ground for 12 to 24 hours. That is the difference between, you know, potentially outpatient ER and some physical therapy and a stay in the ICU being treated with IV antibiotics and then a subsequent stay at a skilled nursing facility. So pick up your rugs, you know, make sure that you don't have cords. For me, you know, those really concrete things we can do to plan to minimize crisis, even if we don't know that we want memory care or that we are going to need, you know, assisted living. There are definitely things that you can do right now to assess your capabilities and the way in which your living environment supports or puts you in danger. And I feel like, I know that it's scary when I talk to people about it. It's scary because they feel like they're losing something. And if I could reframe that for the people I work with, it would be to see that you're taking control of something and controlling the things that will affect your future. Because what I think is hardest for people is when they haven't planned, they haven't made adjustments, and they do have a fall. And then they end up in a skilled nursing facility and they don't have a choice because that's the only facility that had a bed open that day and the hospital was discharging them. And that's very disempowering. That's very disempowering. So if you know, enjoy some of these tours, if you can inform yourself about your options and do everything you can to maximize your independence in your current situation, if you're not willing to make a move or able to make a move or wanting to make a move yet, minimizing that crisis, I think, empowers you to take control over the future. Even if you don't know the specifics, it gives you a measure of control, I think.
So important in having this communication with family. So family knows your wishes and desires. I've had a number of people say, I've told my son, daughter, whoever, all my things I want are in my notebook here. I've saved my handouts from the seminars. This is who I want to help me. This is where I would want to go, because too often we see the crisis, which is so often a fall. Yeah. Decisions are made and they end up where they didn't want to be.
Yes.
We used to, Fred Strom, who would attend our seminars regularly, would usually at this point stand up and say, you know, be prepared, make your decisions, let it known, or your kids will make them for you. And it may not be what you had in mind.
If you're lucky, it's your kids. It might be the case manager at the hospital that doesn't know anything about you, you know, and absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else you want to pick up on that, Debbie?
Yeah, I really enjoy, Kara, what you said, and it's preventing the crisis. We're not always able to prevent a crisis, but really planning to prevent. Having somebody out into your home, not only to do the home safety evaluation, and your physician may be part of this too, but really doing a good assessment of your health, your cognitive, where you are right now. What is your cognitive baseline? How is your emotional health, your psychosocial health? We want to look at all of that so that we can support you. Professionals, like Kara said, can support you in planning for next steps.
And we had a webinar earlier, well, it was back when we had seminars, and we dealt with that very issue in functional mobility and stability. And I'm going blank on her name right now, and I'm so sorry. I think I would put it in the follow-up too, but she's one who does the home assessments and can help people do the very things you're talking about. Also driving, that's one that she's the one we've talked about who can do the assessment in some case to help people adjust, you know, how do I continue driving, or I've come home from a stroke and, you know, what can I do? And we were all set to do a car fit program and then COVID came, but I think her name in just a minute, but functional stability and mobility, she was a great resource. And there are many others, and we need to keep compiling that to make that available to people. All right, thanks.
Can I add something really quick to the driving piece of that? Would that be okay? So
sure.
If you remind me, sometimes when we think of not driving any longer, we feel like that's where we lose our independence. If we can't get up in the morning, get in our car, go to HEB or go to the store, whatever we want to do, we just lost all of our independence. It's not necessarily true. We have a self-assessment that we give our clients. They don't even have to share it with us. They don't have to share it with family. It just gives individuals the opportunity to answer the questions honestly on the self-assessment. See how you're doing. How are you driving? Crumple it up, wrinkle it, throw it away in the trash. Nobody has to see it. But again, like Kara said, it gives you the power. And I think just having that empowerment is going to support you in making good decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Oh, Corrine had a question, but now she seems to have lowered her hand. Okay. Any other questions that people have, or even situations? Okay. So anything further you can share with us that you both can share some stories of someone needing more care than the other, and a couple. Any other words of wisdom that you can?
I thought I turned that off. I apologize.
Any more specifics you could share along that line for people who are wrestling with that? I'll share one example here. Everybody is different. A couple who she was having health issues, I didn't know at the time. For whatever reason, they made the decision that she would be better in assisted living. Her husband went to spend all the, he was with her every day, but he remained in their home. And I think that went on for a year or more. Finally, he's like, why am I keeping this home? I'm spending my time with my wife in this, and it was a very nice assisted living community. She had gotten a 2-bedroom apartment, or a bedroom and a study. And it was very interesting. I went down, I was their realtor, was helping them through the downsizing and selling of their home, and went down and had lunch with them at the community as we were working on paperwork. I enjoyed the opportunity to see this interaction. Here was a gentleman who was quite independent, would go out and play golf, do whatever, but he decided that his best for them, it worked very well. And he was very happy with that. He decided he would be better to move with her into the assisted living, work in that case, and sell their home. I know that's not everybody, and not everybody can do that, and situations are very different. But sometimes we have to, and anyway, pick up on that about when people are experiencing the differences with one person needing more care, whether it be physical, mental, whatever.
So I like what Kara said earlier, and she just mentioned it's really hard when you become the caregiver of your spouse or your partner, and now you're no longer wife, husband, partner, you're a caregiver. And we know there's a lot of education regarding caregiver stress and really how that impacts not only your health, but your quality of life. And the love we have in our heart for those individuals, we feel like, that's our job. We need to continue to care for them. And I'm wondering if Kara might want to also add to this that assisted living might not be the only option, right? There are those continuum of care opportunities. So again, starting at independent living and going down to skilled nursing. So you have that supportive environment if you were to go there. But I think one way or another, having a professional come in, talk with you, family talk with you, start that conversation, because you matter too. So if you are dealing with supporting or caring for your husband, spouse, or partner right now, maybe they have cognitive impairment, Parkinson's, just a lot of health issues. How are you also caring for yourself? So this is a conversation that needs to happen. Kara, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely. Yes. And, I find that there are baby steps that sometimes we can take, and there are resources that we didn't know are available. And so my great gratitude to each of our webinar attendees for educating yourselves, because it's important not only in your life, but now you're a resource for your peers as well. And that's huge to me. When I work with folks, I think the most common way that I work with folks where husband and wife have different clinical needs, it is around memory care issues. And if you are not quite ready to explore different living situations, I really encourage you to look for day respite centers. So these are, adult, I don't like to use these words because it seems infantilizing, but this is what they're called in the community. And if you go to do a Google search, these are the words that you need to use: adult daycare centers. And sometimes getting plugged in within a community can relieve some of that caregiver burden for you. And it gets you around people that already know what some options are and what some likely next steps are. And assuming that your needs as husband and wife are going to be the same for the next 3 years is a bad assumption. What we know about disease progression is that it can be very steep. And so I think sometimes when people are making decisions, it feels like forever, right? It feels like this is a permanent decision. And once I do this, I can never move back out. I can never go back on it. This is forever. And I would encourage you not to see it that way, right? You are going to make the decision that's right for this month, you know, and maybe it turns out to be the decision that's right for the next 6 months, or maybe for the next 6 years. But we get trapped in this idea that whatever we're doing is permanent. And I think that prevents us from making changes sometimes. The other thing that I would mention is that sometimes if we bring care into the home early, then we can delay some of those moves a little bit. And my greatest example, and I know I talk about this with seniors fairly frequently, I cannot imagine the struggle of accepting help with bathing. And when I work with a senior and, you know, they're asking me, what can I do to stay in my home longer? Or what can I do to prevent a crisis? If it is possible to accept help with bathing, or to accept help with yard work, or accept help with, you know, housekeeping, those are huge things. And so even if a wife may not need the memory care support, just hiring a private duty caregiver for a few hours a day, and knowing that it's not permanent, it might change, but having help with bathing or having help with meal preparation can relieve such a huge burden and minimize your fall risk so much that it gives you way more options down the line. And so that would be, you know, my plug is to consider, if it's financially available for you, private duty caregivers. If one partner needs more care than the other, consider adult daycare settings and to get that support as a caregiver.
Very good. I know there's such a need for more respite care in our area. Age does have some, and we have several of the morning programs. I know it's been harder with COVID, but when friends would say, well, that was my morning to have my time. I love caring for my spouse, but I need some time for myself. And the importance of caregivers taking care of themselves. So we're fortunate with a variety of those programs. We always use more, but yeah, that's a very important one. Debbie, did you have something else there?
I actually do. Kara, thank you again. We also want to consider clinical assessment. So I would say to all of you, I'm hoping you all have a great relationship with your primary care doctors. If that doctor isn't taking the time to really listen to you and have a good understanding of what changes may have occurred, they're not there with you at home. So they're not able to see the changes on a daily or weekly basis. So please open that conversation up with your physicians. Let them know any changes. Don't be afraid to have this conversation with your physician, because they're not able to help you unless you talk with them. I can just share one story. I have a client who, her husband was 72, diagnosed by a neurologist with Alzheimer's disease. They started thinking about planning, what are next steps? How am I going to care for him? Her mother had recently passed on from Alzheimer's, so she was really overwhelmed, thinking, what am I going to do now my husband has it, and at such a young age? So I actually went to the neurologist with her a couple times, and we wanted to identify what imaging might be most appropriate. Long story, this went over several months, but what I want to share with you is he actually didn't have Alzheimer's. He had atrial fibrillation, which was slowing the oxygen to his brain. And he also had, he had sleep apnea. So he wasn't breathing. He stopped breathing 40 times in an hour every single night. So again, not getting the oxygen he needed to his brain. Once we brought the clinical and the neurological neuro evaluations together, we identified this man, and doing the proper imaging, this man did not have Alzheimer's disease. It changed their whole outlook on what next steps were, but they almost started planning something that wasn't necessary. So I think my point is, make sure that you're having the conversation with your primary care physician as well. Let them know what's happening at home. Let them know the changes so they're part of that treatment plan. They're part of your treatment team.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Any other questions that people have? Now, we have a very strong support group for our Parkinson's people here in Georgetown Gap, and often Mary Jane Berry is on our calls. And so I know, but I also know there are people who haven't made that connection yet. And Parkinson's is something that can manifest itself in so many ways. But I see a lot of couples who I really admire the way their relationships can evolve to support each other. But since that, again, I'm not intruding. GAPS is a great source, and if that's something you're dealing with, make sure you are aware. Contact Mary Jane Berry. Find out more about the resources that GAPS offers in their monthly meetings and support groups. And it's not a feel sorry for me, I have Parkinson's. It's a very upbeat, it's quality of life, and so it's a fantastic resource. But anything you all want to add, if some people haven't taken advantage of that resource, especially related to Parkinson's. Surprise question. We're going to be quiet on that one. But all the stuff that we've talked about, having a plan, knowing your options, getting accurate information, because we do know it affects people in so many different ways. There, Jenny Mast has a question for us. Let's see. Okay, Jenny, there you are. Hey, Jenny, can you
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have just one general question, and it may be too widespread for this late in this webinar, but all of the talk, most of the talk, let me put it that way, today has talked about couples. I am a single individual, and there may be others who are listening in that are single individuals living alone. And so it isn't a discussion about a spouse, a partner, or someone else. It's about me, myself. Is there anything that you might be able to add? I've taken great notes and information about something, but I'm thinking about just myself. I don't have someone else to be considering. And are there any additional steps that I should be thinking of as an individual versus someone knowing that there's somebody else living with me that might be in better shape or condition or worse shape?
Thank you so much, Jenny, for bringing that up. And that is very, very important. So, Kara, Debbie, what can you help us with that?
I think this is Debbie's wheelhouse. I can hear her thoughts. I'm going to let you go first, Debbie.
Oh, well, I really am just thinking that I think everything that Kara and I and Virginia have shared really applies whether you're a couple or an individual. We still want you to have that assessment, take the same precautions, find help to prepare planning for next steps. Make sure an advanced directive is in place. Talk with family, friends, whoever is important in your life, so that you're sharing those wishes with everyone that you want to know what those wishes are. But I do think that the same points that we've made apply to you, Jenny, just as it would somebody who's a couple.
To underscore that, I think the most important thing for seniors that live on their own is to tell a wide variety of people. And, we talk about how our needs change over time. I have worked with so many seniors who designate a medical power of attorney, and they tell their medical power of attorney, I want X, Y, and Z. I don't want to go to a nursing home. I have this fund set aside so you can put me in a private, right? They go through all that, but then they don't go back and check. And something happens to their medical power of attorney. Maybe it's their son, and their son gets deployed to Afghanistan. And now the person they had speaking for them is gone. So you have, when it's a partnership, or when you have somebody else in the home with you, you kind of have a built-in accountability buddy, is what I call folks like that, to hold you accountable and make sure that you're doing those things. And I feel like when you're a senior living alone, you don't have that same accountability buddy. And so identifying, maybe there's a peer that you see regularly, but making sure, to Debbie's point, making sure that you have a medical power of attorney designated, and that individual knows what you want. Now, the hard part about that is that technology is crazy fast, y'all, crazy fast. And the way that I practice, my job has changed radically. For example, I don't know if we have many of your peers that have ALS, but it's a neurodegenerative disease. And 10 years ago, the prognosis for that disease was something like 2 years. But we have this machine now called a Trilogy, which is basically a home ventilator. And so for those of us that wrote advanced directives saying we never want to be on a ventilator, they don't quite encapsulate this new reality that we have this new technology, this new device, and maybe that changes things a little bit. And so it was something that Debbie said earlier about planning for what you want more than trying to plan for every potential crisis. So, what I would encourage you to think about with advanced directives, or what I would encourage you to think about when communicating your wants and needs to your medical power of attorney, is what are those values? What are those experiences? If you don't want to be hooked up to machines, what does that mean to you? Are you okay being, in a dialysis chair for 5 hours a day if you can still go to bridge that night? What are those things? And having those conversations, with your medical power of attorney. And, maybe you need to put a reminder in your calendar to review every year, dear medical power of attorney, are you still on board for this job? Because the last thing you want is to do all of that planning and have your MPOA either not be there or be uninformed or whatever that is. And so there's just a little more due diligence, I think, that has to happen if you are on your own, so that it's not some case manager in a hospital making decisions for you.
Carol, I'm glad you shared that about how technology has changed. I mean, I had no idea about the home ventilator and that. And so part of that is a different kind of being informed if we had that need. And so, thanks for sharing that story. It was interesting as you talk about revisiting some of our medical advanced directive we have for the last several months been dealing kind of with those issues about legal preparation. What are those documents we need to have? And it's not just have them and put them on the shelf and never deal with them. And especially with what you were just reminding us of, making sure they're up to date with the person and so on. Okay. I hope that helped Jenny a little bit. That the social network is so important, and having information available. And back to whether it be Alexa or an Apple Watch. A friend of mine, after a fall, when she had a hard time getting communication out, her son got her an Apple Watch so that she would have that with her, so she felt she could talk into that. And we just see such horror stories associated with falls. And preparing the environment is a big step. Okay, let's see. Well, we're just about to our time here. Any last words that we haven't covered, Kara or Debbie, that you want to call to our attention today?
I think we've covered so much. And I think just as a follow-up, or to reiterate, just reach out to those professionals who are able to support these conversations, to support the planning. If you have an advanced directive, make sure people can find it. I know there's been a lot of opportunities where we've needed to find an advanced directive and we weren't able to. So there's a professional, though, that would sit down, facilitate that conversation, because an advanced directive, it can be daunting, and they can be very long, so that you really understand what your rights are, what those wishes are, what it means to be on a ventilator, what it would mean to be intubated if you needed to, what feeding tubes mean. So have that conversation with a professional to make sure that your wishes are documented accurately. but I don't know, Kara, is there anything else you would add?
Extreme gratitude for y'all putting this together and making this resource available. I think, you know, as we're talking, Debbie and Virginia, we're like, wow, we've covered so much, and we really have. And I guess my fear, if I will put it out there, is that folks would just feel overwhelmed by all this and not know where to start. So my pitch, if I'm going to make one, is, dear seniors, there are just a legion of extremely passionate and educated people that have services for free that are just waiting for you to call us. Like, the only thing I do all day is wait for somebody to call me, like put up the bat symbol, and we will come. So please don't feel like it's a burden. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own. There are resources and we want you to use us. So just call us. It's literally, you know, why I get up in the morning, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk, and you know, anything we can do to be a resource to you, let us know.
We are going to be putting out, we always do a follow-up to people, you know, thanking you for attending, and add resources since we're not live at our seminars, or we would give out handouts and resources there. So we will be following up with some links to resources, some PDFs that you can download. That probably won't be going out to next week because we're still putting some ideas together. And I appreciate what you said, Kara, there. I always struggle with, I mean, we all know, we go to seminars, we hear all these great ideas, we go to lunch, and you know, it's out there. So one of the things that I'm working on is, okay, what are you going to do to get unstuck? You know, and we're just putting together some tips. One of them is, it's like you said, what do I want? What is my plan? It's not that I'm preparing for every eventuality, but this is the big picture. What are advantages and disadvantages to my making a move now? A book I was reading yesterday, I like this tip, and I've stolen it, put it in my handout that we'll be distributing. But, you know, if I do these are the advantages, the benefits of making a move, perhaps that's what I'm considering. These are the limitations. These are maybe the negatives that I should consider. What I really liked was the idea, write out your list and put it away, and don't look at it for a few days. Then pull it out and look at it. And that I think helps us, part of that you talked about, the emotional part, reducing some of that. How do we deal with the realities? But we'll be sharing our ideas. We will be putting resources out there. We will be, appreciate Karen and Debbie sharing their information. And, you know, again, if they may be able to help, maybe direct you somewhere else, but that's what we all want you to have, is the information to make the informed decisions. And thank you so much, Debbie and Kara, for sharing today, and just the fantastic amount of information you provided. Our next webinar, Facts on Dementia, Memory Care. Again, we're not talking about the health part, we're talking about the living part, and how do we, the quality of life issue continues with that one. This is 1 month, usually we're the third Thursday for October. We will be on October 22nd. So we look forward to seeing you at that one. And again, questions you have, and I love it, just like Kara said, when people call me, Virginia, you mentioned this, where can I go? If I don't have the exact resource, I have people to go to help us make that connection. We want to, as we said, to educate, empower, equip people, seniors, to make decisions. That's really what I'm very committed that. If we can form the relationships and help you as you work through your downsizing, I'm grateful for that. Our Kara, as we said, is with Traditions Health. They're one of our sponsors, as we mentioned earlier, along with Visiting Angels, Vera Bank, Silver Key Benefits. I sure do hope I got everybody. Yeah, Wesleyan, okay. And then our Seniors Living Smarter services. But thanks again. And yes, I echo what Kara stressed several times, and Debbie implied it too. Thank you, attendees, for being here, for taking time. Oh, and by the way, I think we've made that clear to people. We are now putting the webinar, recorded webinars, on our blog. It'll be next week when it will be up. But if you want to revisit this, a lot of information was shared, or you want to call it to other people's attention, the Seniors Living Smarter website, on the navigation bar, blog, and you will see the recorded webinars up there, and some information will be included. Thanks to Jeff Grant for helping put that together for us. So with that, we'll say stay well, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you in October, but feel free to call on me if I can help or I can direct you to other people. Thanks for being here. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Wow.